Ann Price, thank you for agreeing to be our Grand Lighting Marshal for the Christ Tree for 2022.
You are welcome. It's a privilege.
Well, we're very excited. In this interview, we just want to get to know you a little bit better for the audience. You've been an Enid for since
40 since 79.
since 1979. In your early life, you did some teaching.
Yes.
Can you tell us just a little bit about where you taught and what classes?
Well, after we moved to Enid, I taught privately until my sons were all graduated out of high school. And then I went back and renewed my teaching certificate, and I taught at Taft Elementary for 2 or 3 years. By that time, Mark was in at Georgia Tech, and Denny was getting to go see him play, and I wasn't because I was teaching school, and I thought, I'm getting left out on this deal. So I, excuse me, I resigned, and then I went to teach a music class, a basic music class out at Phillips University in the music department. But I had more freedom to come and go, and I did that. And then after I lost Denny, and that was, it's been 22 years, and he passed away in 2000, and he had some heart problems, but he was still going full steam ahead, and all the boys had been here to help run a camp, and they were practicing, and he went down to hear them and got on the court with them, and God just took him home. It was so fast. They said it lasted about a minute. He shot the ball and I guess couldn't breathe. And he said, "Hold on a minute, boys." And the man standing next to him took his arm and laid him on the ground, and he was gone.
So, Ann, how did you find out?
Well, Tammy called, and an interesting thing about this was because the boys were so scattered now, they were never all together in their families and everything. And he had already lost his dad, but his mom had been up here visiting so she could see all the grandkids and everything. And his only sister and her husband had just walked in the door. They had come up. So everybody that was family was here. And that's why we were able to, do the funeral as quick as we did. It happened on a Friday, and we had it on a Monday. And that was another thing we just really talked about because of what they did, and then we were so scattered to have everybody all here. And our plan was that night they were going to leave the next day, and we were going to have a cookout for everybody. And so that was kind of where we were. And just as Don and Janice walked in the house, they were still standing up. Don said, "Where is Denny?" And I said, "Well, he's down watching the boys play ball, but I told him to be home by 1 o'clock. And it was 1 o'clock, and the phone rang, and it was Tammy down at the Y. And she said, "Ann, this is Tammy." And I just knew. And I said, "It's Denny, isn't it?" And she said, "Yes, he's gone." And it was just that fast, We had seen him. He had come through the house an hour before, told us he was going down there, and looked just like he always did. So it was a shock, and but everybody was here, and it was a good thing that they were, and so it was at that point then that I had to start thinking about what I was going to do, and I increased my piano students to 50, and that's what I did, all day, and I did that for 2 years, and and I was just grateful for it, and I, saw the parents as they brought them and left with them, but after 2 years, I just felt isolated. And I mean, I was going to church and everything, but I didn't have a chance to really make any real close friendships because I was always working. And so that is where that story that I told you the other day, where I just, one morning, I woke up and I was laying in the bed and kind of in the middle of the bed, and I just turned over on my back, and I just remember it vividly, and I said, and I just started praying, and I, told the Lord that I needed something else in my life that to do, but I didn't know what it was. But then, as we women do, I started telling him what I'd like for him to do for me, And I just remember saying, if it's your will, I would like to find something to do in ministry. I don't, I didn't have any direction. I didn't have anything in mind. And
He delivered.
And he delivered. And he didn't wait long. And so, I prayed this prayer, and I just said, if it's your will. And so at that point, it was about 2, maybe 3 weeks later, and I got this telephone call from David Burley, who was working at the time for Hope Outreach. He was helping Paula. And they had just moved to their location now. And I had heard of Hope Outreach and seen it, but I had never been in it, and I didn't know how it was set up, that they had started it as a thrift store to make money that they could help people, And so he said, Ann said, we've just moved here, and we're looking to form a board. Would you be interested in being on our board? And I told him, I said, well, David, truthfully, I don't know. I know about you, but I don't know anything. I don't know what I would do. And he said, well, why don't you come to a board meeting and find out, how we're set up and what we do. And I said, well, I'll do that. And so I went, the next board meeting they had, and then I went to a second board meeting. And the lady at the time that was doing the job that I ended up doing, it changed names, but they had her doing 2 different things. Back then, she could go to schools and talk to students. And not in Enid, but all the little schools around Enid. And she loved that. But then part of hers was to be there to be able to offer pregnancy tests to girls that came in. And she couldn't be in 2 places at the same time. And so she told him, said, I love both of them, but I just can't do both of these. And she made the choice to do the ones where she went out to the schools. And while she was talking, and I was listening to what it was she did, and back then they were just getting started, so that was basically what we did. We just offered a pregnancy test, and then when the girls came, we had a chance to visit with them, about parenting and about the Lord, and because it was a Christian ministry. And so I did both. I kept my piano students because I was making good money doing that. And then about a half a day for 4 days a week, I went down there. And for the first couple of years, that's what I did. And it was a whole brand new ministry for me because I'd never been around, young ladies that needed that kind of help. And I was just shocked, really. I was surprised that there were that many.
The parenting ministry really grew and blossomed under your leadership. Matt Lohman, executive director, provided me some statistics from really the ministry that you've led for almost 20 years. An estimated number of hours and classes taught was about 30,000 hours. Today,
that makes me tired. I didn't know it was that many.
Today they have offer over 3,000 different parenting lessons for their clients.
Well, after that first couple of years, there was another ministry in town that also helped young ladies, but it closed down because of funding. And Paula called me upstairs one day, and she told me what had happened, and she said, "Ann, it's time that we get hands-on with these clients and more than just visiting with them." And she didn't know either, but she said, "I'm sending you to Focus on the Family. They're going to have a nationwide meeting of all the ladies that do that kind of work, and just see what's out there." And I'm just one of those that when somebody asks me to do something, I said, "Okay, I'm going." And I felt like a duck out of water because these ladies had worked in it. But what I didn't realize, and the timing of everything is just incredible, but I kept hearing them talk. I was just listening to them, and they had different people you could go listen to. And the thing about Hope that I liked was, and you being on their board, you know this, I like the idea that this was a program. Back up till there, when you had them come, you had to figure out what you were going to do and had going to say to them. And they kept talking about this lady that had just come out, and she was there, and everybody was going to hear her. And so I thought, I'm going to go listen to see what that's all about. And when she started talking, and it was such a complete program. All the people would have to do, the mentors, was it had the DVD, it had the lesson plans, everything was already done for you, and you just decided which one you were going to do, And so I knew it was going to be pretty expensive. Back then, when she started, it was 9 modules with 45 lessons. And it basically was about during the pregnancy and right after you got the baby home. And then just those 20 years that we added Glenda, that was another side story. So I asked Paula, I told her what I'd found. And I said, "Paula, it just blends with our, it's a Christian one, and it's got all the stuff," but I said, "It's kind of expensive." And she said, "Well, how much is it?" And I said, "Well," she had one left, and she said if I would take it, she'd sell it to us for $1,000. And Paula hesitated just a second, and said, "Bring it home." So here I was, carrying these 9 modules of 45 lessons home, and So, that's how we got the program. And then I would look at it and I would think, now how am I going to get it from the boxes to a program? And then Glenda Abbey was Denny's secretary out at Phillips at the time, and she said, well, she called me one day and she said, Ann, would you write me a recommendation to, be a secretary at the school? I said, sure. I hadn't seen her in a while. And so she came in, she was sitting there talking to me, and we were catching up with the kids and things. And she said, and then I was behind my desk and she was across from me. And I can't even tell you why, but as we were talking, I got the Lord saying, the person you need to get that program up and running is sitting across the desk from you. And I just said, Glenda, have you ever done Christian work and, worked in a Christian environment? She said, no. And, she knew me and she knew the boys because she had been with Denny for 4 or 5 years out at Phillips. And she said, no. And I said, well, we've got this brand new program. And I knew how good she was because Denny she just kept all the sports and everybody involved in the money, all of it. She was just a great secretary to him out at Phillips. And she said, well, I'll have to be paid, Ann, because they were running on a shoestring then. And she said I'd have to get paid what I was making at Phillips, which wasn't very much. Nobody was getting paid a whole lot out there. And she said, I need to talk to Stephen about it. That's her husband. And she did. And I went up and asked Paula. I said, Paula, I think I found our lady. And she said, who? And I said, her name's Glenda Abbey. And she said, oh, I know Glenda. I used to work out at Phillips. I know Glenda. And so I said, well, she said she has to be paid. And I never asked Paula how, but she got put on the roll. And so when you walk in and look at it, and it's so organized, and we went from those 9 modules, 45 lessons, to
3,000 today. And you helped 1,707 people, clients. There's 512 babies been born into that program. Tell us about Earn While You Learn.
Well, that was what was so neat about it. It followed, first of all, the Earn While You Learn is what caught my attention because I knew Paula, she believed in helping people, but she believed in people helping themselves too. And so she didn't think it was good just to give without them having to do something. And the way the program was set up was, it was easy for us, but all they had to do was come for 1 hour a week and watch a video, and they always had a mentor in there with them. And then they would discuss it, what if they had any questions, they would do the homework, and everything they did, they could earn points. And with those points, if they wanted to let them stack up and save them, then we had a store that they got to shop in, and they got to shop free for anything. Diapers. If you went into the store today, I went in it not long ago. Janelle Klein's just getting ready to leave us. She was phenomenal with that store. It looks like a Dillard's would or something.
It's first class.
Yeah, first class. Even now up to baby beds. They have the baby bed, anything you need for a baby, and it would be by points. They don't even, all they have to do is come in and learn.
Learn how to be a good parent.
Mm-hmm. And that's how they're paying for this stuff. And so that is the gist of the Earn While You Learn, and I think it's the most remarkable program I've ever seen because it puts it back on them, and and yet it's something they can afford and benefits them. But we also, because it was a Christian organization, we also, you know, we didn't force that on them, but we had so many of our DVDs that, you know, like we had some focus on the family ones and things, and if the occasion arose, we could visit with them about that,
which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
That really fits with Hope Outreach's slogan, which is empowering people to responsible living.
And that's just what, when I was sitting there listening to that lady, and she was talking about it, and she said, we've never believed in just giving things away, because it doesn't mean anything. You know, they have to earn it. And the thing is, they could do extra stuff. We made it easy for them to make a lot of points. If they wanted to stay, and we had boards up, and all of it had to do with babies and stuff. And if they wanted to stay and do a board or whatever else, some of them would maybe earn maybe 15 or 20 points if the boy came, that was going to be the father. You got points, so you could build those points quickly. And we had some that did phenomenal with it, and we've got people all over town. I went to the grocery store the other day, and this lady, and there were so many of them, and I passed her in the aisle, and she said, "Miss Price," and she looked, and she had all of her kids around her, and they all looked good, and she was in there buying groceries, and I'm just always. And then they've just gone ahead, and we've got nurses, and in the hospitals where we go, it's just been amazing now that we see so many of them
pouring into young families, young women, young men,
and they're doing good.
Yes, and which and the other ministry that and I believe that you started this was the 7th grade girls Abstinence Tea and the boys Tailgate Bash.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Well, we had been going a couple or 3 years, I can't remember exactly, but after we moved to our location now, we just took a big boom. I guess people knew more about we were there, and there was at one point we were seeing 75 a week, and the COVID kind of shut things down, and I don't know how much it's built back up, but but anyway, that's we started seeing so many of these young ones coming in from junior high, and yeah, mom brought one day that was in junior high, and she knew what we did, and she wanted the girl. She wasn't even in our program, but we opened it up to anybody. If the parent wanted to come and sit there with their child and watch one, and so this, I don't know, it just was bothering me that I knew they weren't getting anything through the school system about abstinence. They had everything else, you could get whatever you needed, but they didn't hear about the other end of it. And so I just, I don't know how that happened, but I knew Ruth Ann Erdner had been my principal at Taft, and so she knew me, and so one day I called her and asked her if I could come up and talk to her about it, and she sat there and listened to me, and I was trying to explain the situation, and I said, is there any way that we could get any kind of a program? And they're very careful about what they let in the public schools, because if they let you, then they have to let everybody. And so she said, I had written out on paper, the whole thing. And she said, leave that with me and let me read it and think about it and see what we can come up with. And there were some things that, because she knew we were a Christian ministry, and she read it, and she said, well, we can take it before the board. The board has to approve it. And she said, we'll just see what happens. And so she told me I had to go to a board meeting, and it scared me to death because it looked like you were going to court.
Inquisition.
They were sitting around that table, and they were doing their business, and then they said, Ann Price wants to visit with you about something. And I made Brent go with me because I thought, I don't know whether I can do this or not. And I got up there to start to tell him about it. And Ruth Ann just stopped me. And she started telling him in her words, And I was just standing there listening to her. And then she said, well, let's vote on it and see. And every hand went up.
Wow.
So really, she's the one that opened, not the superintendent, but she was the assistant superintendent. And but that was the one thing that they said we couldn't do was the Christian emphasis.
But you could teach girls and boys about abstinence.
Right.
During that 12-year program, Ann, they estimate that about 8,400 seventh grade boys and girls went through the program.
I was really proud of the fact that when we started it, we let the school pick where they were having the most trouble, and guess what they picked? 6th grade. We didn't pick that; they did. Mm-hmm. And they said it's that time when they go from elementary into junior high. And so we, couldn't do the Christian thing, the part of it, but we could do the abstinence part, and that was what was concerning me anyway, was why this was happening so young. And so she's the one that got the door open for us. And the first year we had it where the Mark Price used to be Mark Price Arena, in that area, and it was just Enid, the 6th grades of Enid, and then we did the boys' tailgate, and we went to a couple of other towns that were doing it to kind of see how they worked that, and got ideas that we used from them. But what happened was we didn't realize that all the little schools around were having the same problem. I was just thinking about Enid, and we began to get calls when they heard about this and said, could we come? And so the first couple of years, it was just ever how many students were in Enid. But after that, every school in Garfield County, plus Hennessy, always came. And so we always had, and Carol, you will know this, but we always had about 500 girls, and we had about 500 boys. So I would say that's numbers pretty close, because not the first 2 years, but after that, it was about 1,000 young people every year that came through that. And you just never know, how it took. We felt like our speaker was good, and Brent did it for the boys for a long time, and that worked really well because, the Lord just, Brent has always been such a strong Christian, but he, he had that ball part of him that young boys like, and he, could really get down. And what people didn't realize, he said lots of time, he was still doing his faith part of it, but in a way that, it was not, they didn't know it was from the Bible. It was in just his words. And so we did that until COVID shut it down.
Well, Ann, this interview, you've hopefully helped the audience to understand why we picked you as our Grand Lighting Marshal. Our family wanted to honor someone who's had a lifetime of service. Last year with Dr. Murphy, this year with you. Faithfulness to God, faithfulness in helping thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. Your kindness, your tenacity, your leadership. We just want to say thank you for that. And what would be the last? I'm going to ask you just a bit about your faith. I know you're a very, very strong Christian. You taught community group or Bible study or Sunday school, as we call sometimes, for almost 20 years as well. What part of your faith is the most important to you today? We're in different seasons of life, and we grow as Christians, and you seem to be in a very sweet spot. So what would be the one part of your faith that you would like to just share with the viewers of this interview?
Well, and as long as I became a Christian when I was 10, and the Lord I just used to be timid, and I remember growing up, I had to have the bedroom next to Mom and Dad's because I was afraid of the dark and all the things. And I just, wasn't out there. I was quiet, and but when I met Denny, and he was a strong leader in our family and everything, and I knew Denny was going to take care of me, no matter where we were. He was a good husband and father, and he was going to, and I loved the Lord. And when I became a Christian, I was unhappy and everything, and I just knew something was missing. And my mom told me, she said they got worried about me because I'd cry a lot and stuff. And she said when she took me to the doctor to see if, there was something wrong with me, he came out and he said, "There's nothing wrong with Ann." Said she's just asking questions that are bigger than her age. She keeps saying, "I don't understand where it all starts and where it all ends. I can't figure." And the Lord was working on me then. And then I had my experience with the Lord, when I was 10 years old. And there was no doubt in my mind. And used to, preachers would say, "Now, if you're sure, you're sure." I was sure. And I was sitting alone. It was in the fall, and I was sitting alone in the house, and Mom and Dad were out working the garden, and I was just sitting there, and I just the best way to describe it is I wasn't necessarily thinking about anything, but I was just sitting there, But this peace came over me. It was like something just came through the air and I got up and told Mom and Dad, I said, I want to become a Christian. And she was a Sunday school teacher and a strong Christian, and so she put me in the car and took me up to the little pastor that we had in Nennecaw, and so he could explain it all to me, and of course I didn't understand all of it, what he was saying, but in my heart, I knew something had changed. And I've just always known from that point on that was my foundation. That was what I was worried about. That's why I kept not being happy. And so, it started there. And then when I met Denny, he was a very strong Christian. We had both been raised in the same type of households where the parents had to work and everything. And so, but that's, but as long as I had Danny, I felt like he was taking care of me. But it was only after I lost him in the last 22 years that was when I depended on him. And he has been there for every situation that has come up since then. And it does makes you stronger as you get older and as you realize how little you have in control of everything. But he just walks, as he says, he walks with you and holds your hand and walks you through it. And as the doors opened and shut, I just trusted that. And I was in really good health until I had that mini stroke, and that came right after the COVID thing hit. But up till then, I had planned to stay 20 years, and I almost made 19. But then when that happened, and they sent us home because of our ages and all of that, and then I had the mini stroke, I knew, and that's what I told, Hope. I said, Matt asked me the last time I visited with him, he said, "Do you miss it?" And I said, well, the best thing I can describe to you is I loved it. And Brent always said, getting that job is what saved you, Mom, because it gave you something important to do outside of yourself, And he said, that's when I started seeing you move forward and not just stay where you were. And that's when you start giving yourself away to somebody else, then it benefits you. And but I said, they gave me that little going away party, and I said it was really nice and everything, and I love it down there. But I said, when it was over and I walked out the front door, I said, the best way I can describe it is this burden just lifted off of my shoulders. And I said, I love it, but I don't miss it, because I knew I was entering into the next period. Mm-hmm. And I've loved retirement because it's the first time in my life that all of my time wasn't designated to somebody else, that I could go to Bible studies and have lunches with people and all the things that people do, but still, rest when I need to.
And we have one final question, Renee.
Yeah, I just was curious. I mean, you're an obvious good choice for the Grand Marshal this year, and knowing that you are going to be lighting Christ's tree.
Mm-hmm.
How does that make you feel?
Well, it's a really honor. I don't feel like I'm deserve it, but I will enjoy representing. You know, I've tried to represent him in my daily walk, and live my life according to what he says how we need to be. But that's quite an honor to be bestowed on me, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope I don't forget how to count from 10 to 1.
You only have to start with 10 and the crowd will take over from there.
But yeah, it's going to be exciting. I think the boys are really happy about it. You know.
Well, you raised a great family, and thank you, Ann, for agreeing to be our Grand Lighting Marshal, and thank you for sharing your story with our audience as well.
Okay.